Supervisors meeting, our budget hearings on June 17th. And can we all rise for the pledge? Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for a certificate of posting?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. And as we know, today is our special meeting for our budget hearings, and we're going to continue the budget process into this afternoon and, if necessary, for tomorrow afternoon. But anyhow, with that, we'll go ahead and start with our introduction and opening remarks by our CEO Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do is highlight for you the letter I presented to you in this budget, and I'm going to go ahead and review most of this with you and with the public. During the last 4 years, the county has been faced with reductions in revenues, budgets, public services, and workforce. Fiscal year 11 and 12 ended with 435 full-time employees, and in 12-13 dipped down to a low of about 371. This has impacted a majority of general fund departments, several of which have reduced staffing at inadequate levels, really jeopardizing the completion of many critical tasks and obligations that we have here in the administrative office and in the county. An example of this is with our auditor. He's currently working with no accountants. Administration's been challenged with 5 out of 8 key employees retiring or leaving. These critical positions were only backfilled with part-time and temporary help, and for the most part are still vacant. The Sheriff's Department has been reduced with staffing levels. It's impacted overall safety and requiring a substantial increase of overtime in order to function. Departments operating with minimal staff and reduced office hours are really barely meeting the obligations within the required deadlines. The lack of resources to perform the necessary duties and services puts the county really in a vulnerable and in a weak position. The county continues to deal with the escalating financial obligations and contributions through using OPEB or through OPEB, as well as PERS and our health insurance. Currently, this comprises of up to 32% of salaries and benefits within our portion of our budget. And in an effort to bridge the revenue shortfall and increase in cost, the county took temporary measures in 9 and 10, fiscal years 9 and 10, with the institution of furloughs. An analysis of the financial effects of furloughs has proven that vacation liability has increased substantially and office hours have decreased, causing really problems for our citizens that we currently serve. Salary step freezes were instituted in fiscal year 10-11 as a further means to bridge the financial issues that the county was facing. However, that has greatly impacted employee morale, as it is witnessed by higher than unusual or usual employee turnover rate. The county is losing valuable staff to other employers and also to early retirements. So today the county employs about, as I mentioned, 371 FTEs. This is, again, nearly the lowest levels of service in the last 2 decades. With increased demands from the state and federal government mandates or obligations, the county must remedy and address where these issues lie. Our county has an obligation to provide general county services to its citizens in the area of fiscal accountability, safety, property assessment, and taxes. In order to achieve these services, the county must provide the appropriate staffing levels through the use of part-time and full-time employees in the areas of general services and safety. The recommended budget before you, the fiscal year 13-14, addresses the issues highlighted, and I propose the cessation of furloughs, which will allow a return to a more regular service of hours in the offices, as well as to help reduce the county's vacation liability that we're faced with now at about $2.2 million. I further propose to reinstate salary step increases for all eligible employees, which will help reduce employee turnover, as well as the cost associated with new hire of training. With regards to achieving sustainability for future years, it's imperative that the county address the greatest impacts of its budget, which is the health insurance, PERS contribution, and the OPEB liability. Salary or benefit savings reported, the budget are a result of anticipated employee concessions and are subject to collective bargaining process where applicable. Due to in the housing market, the county's property tax revenue has been negatively impacted over the past 4 years. However, according to recent headlines, home prices have increased over the last year, while businesses and construction continue to recover, thus increasing customer confidence and bolstering the economy. You know, it's really doubtful that we'll probably reach the 06, 08 levels that we've reached anytime soon. But projections indicate an upward trend, and really what we would like to bring to your county or bring to you is that we're still faced with many daunting challenges, enormous healthcare cost, retirement liabilities. Hence, we really need to tread with caution moving forward, which is why the overall recommended budget is basically status quo from the services and supplies perspective. The addition of key positions addresses the weak areas that were a result from prior year's severe budget cuts. So the recommended budget before you is built on a few assumptions here. The cessation of county furlough program, reinstatement of salary step increases, analysis of health insurance PERS, OPEB, and subsequent long-term solutions, increase of key personnel, which we'll be discussing during the budget hearing process, as well as a $1.6 million reimbursement of the Health and Human Services Agency Fund for overpayment over the years out of the general fund contributions, and a $1 million projected rollover from 12-13. So really in conclusion, it's a pleasure to bring this to your board, a balanced budget with some level of relief by adding some specific FTEs to the areas where we need them. And this also will, in addition to this, furloughs will be discontinued, thus adding more staff time, approximately 15,000 to 18,000 hours. This really translates to more service hours to the local community, residents, and internal staff. This is a budget that removes the Band-Aid, so to speak, and addresses our long-term and short-term issues. There are signs of economic relief at the state and local levels. The county, again, must tread with caution and address current issues so that it can once again attain a healthy financial future for the citizens and employees. So those are my opening remarks to your board. I also wanted to discuss with you some housekeeping with regards to how we're handling the budget process this year. It's going to be a little bit different than how we've handled the budget process in the past. First of all, as you look at the budget hearing format, the schedule, there are items that will be on consent agenda. To make sure that your board's aware of that. We'll be handling them just like we would a regular board meeting. And then we have a public hearing at 1:30 and a regular agenda that we have with the items that your board requested to be on regular agenda. The other item, too, is that this is the first time your board's using a PDF or a computer to go over the budget. In years past, you've actually had a pretty big binder with all the information. So what I wanted to do is just kind of highlight for you. You're probably aware of it already, but I wanted to make sure that the public as well as you are aware that in the budget itself in the software there's links that actually go to the budget unit itself. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. So if you're going to have an item number, which is 1 through 89, next to it is going to be the budget number, and then the description of that budget number. You can click on that. It'll take you to the actual information that you want to see. The other thing is, too, is the The software itself on the Adobe Reader that you're using has a page number up on top. As you can see there, Melinda has that there. Up on the very top of the page, you'll see 1, 2, 3 of page 275. So as we reference this, I'd like for us to reference it by the packet number. So that would be the page number on the packet or on the actual PDF file. The page numbers within the budget itself are going to be a little different. That's the reason why there's going to be maybe a discrepancy. So if somebody comes up from the public or someone references the number, they may reference the paper or the packet or the budget itself, which is going to be a different number. So just be mindful of that. Those numbers for you are going to be on the bottom of the page. So you're going to notice that that page number is different than the one up on top. So if we refer to packet number, it's going to be the PDF file because it's overall the entire packet, which will have a different number. So make sure that the board's aware of that. In addition to that, we've added schedules for your board this year. We haven't done that recently. So there are schedules outlining the roll-ups, in essence, of how we received or how we achieved the budget. And that's found for you on page 24 through 36 within your packet. There's also a handout for you. It's going to be, you should have that at your desk. It's going to be Schedule 6, revenues. So this particular item was not published in the, on June 7th, so there's some packets in the back for the public. They can actually go ahead and grab a copy of that as well. During the regular agenda, Melinda and I will be presenting to you the budget, the actual budget unit numbers, and reviewing them with you. In a matter of time, if there's a question or concern that your board wants more information from the department head or their analyst, feel free to call them up, and then they can answer. Or if you just want them to come up, request them, and then they'll come up and be able to comment on their items. There are, I want to highlight a few corrections, changes, or actual typos. You should have another piece of paper here. It has general fund contributions and non-department expense. This particular item is 180. That's found for us on page 75. Within this item here, we had published it with $328,000 in the PTAF, or in the ERAF location, excuse me. That's been removed, so you have a corrected version on your desk. The other item is the Ag Commissioner. On the bottom of this particular item, you'll see there's a piece of paper there. The next page highlights a change from 6.56 FTE, and then which was reduced to 6.55 FTE. And under fixed assets, there's an item here, the sheriff's glass, which was $10,000. This item was not on the fixed assets, so you have a copy of that for you. It's the next page. It was actually in the budget in the 210 details. Just want to make sure that you're aware of that. We will be requesting, really didn't want to do this, but we had to. We were trying to get away with not having to pull anything from consent, but we're going to have to pull item 21, which shows 300 next to it on the budget number. Actually, should be 303. But this particular item, I guess there was a mistake by the state with the federal highway funds that actually impact this 303 fund. So has no impact on the general fund, but we do want to pull it just so that way Public Works can discuss that with you and talk to you about that change that's going to be in that unit. At the end of the budget hearings, I'd like to come back to your board with a last-minute amendment. It's just going to be within a CIP. It has no impact on the general fund, but I do want to actually come back to you at the end. Just make sure you're aware of that. And we also have a contingency page that you should have as well. We've actually allocated the contingencies for you. That's obviously going to be talked about on item number 89, which is going to be our last budget unit. But during the budget hearings, we're going to be discussing some of those changes. I just want to make sure that your board's aware of that during the process we're going to be highlighting some of these changes in the contingency. One of them in particular was at a request from the May 28th special board meeting that we had with adding a corrections officer deputy to the sheriff's office. So we wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. But we've actually tried to make it as easy to read as possible with this sheet of paper here. So in essence, just keep in mind that most of this budget is really status quo from last year, as mentioned, again with just some of the highlighted changes. And other than that, I just want to turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, and very good report and overview and explanation as far as how we're proceed going forward. With that, I'm going to go and ask each supervisor if there's any consent items that they would like to pull. Supervisor Rivas, is there? Supervisor De La Cruz? Supervisor Barrios?
None. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Munzer?
None.
Anybody from the public or staff would like to pull any of the consent agenda? Seeing none, with the item noted by CEO Espinoza 21 to be pulled, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Move to approve temporary due pass on all consent items minus item number 21.
20.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Supervisor De La Cruz?
And that we still going to have another opportunity to ask questions on the consent items. Might as well just ask it right now. On the housing and economic development, budget number 267, $10,000. It has a $10,000 membership dues. CJ, you want to explain what that is?
Mr. Chair, what page is that on?
Page 142.
Honorable Chair, Board of Supervisors, CJ Valenzuela, Housing Coordinator. Supervisor De La Cruz, yes, that as part of my budget, that's typically has always been included is the Economic Development Corporation. As you recall, in the past, the board has contributed a higher amount, and then I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, lowered it to about 10,000. So the Economic Development Corporation, that line item by default just happens to be included in my budget. Therefore, that's why you have housing and economic development. So that's aside, nothing to do with my salary or expense. That just happens to be included in there. So that's EDC money right there. So just to let you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You know, for the benefit of the board, that item, I had the opportunity this morning speak with the CEO Espinoza, and as it has been in the past, one of the board members has been attending the EDC meetings, and the CEO has been attending those meetings as well. And I think going forward, we're trying to delegate CJ to represent the county at those meetings and try to do what we can to assist EDC going forward. So, okay. Any other questions? Or all right, we'll move on to the regular agenda.
No.
Item 21.
Mr. Chair,
Oh, I'm sorry.
item number 21.
Yes. Go ahead. Item 21.
Mr. Chair, as we move forward and discuss these items, I would like to for somebody, whether it be our CAO or staff, to give us the page numbers where we're going to be moving through these, because they're going to possibly move fast, and we need to go back to the area that they're discussing. So,
Right.
will that be appropriate?
That would be. Pardon me? Yes.
We did.
Yeah, we did.
We did vote.
And it was a
did
5-0.
vote. It was probably inappropriate that I had, we discussed it, but
It's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. First, let me apologize. I'm a little bit unorganized this morning. We're dealing with something in Public Works this morning of a personal nature, so I don't have all of my paperwork here. I can tell you in general terms what's going on with the situation, and if there's something additional that you need, I can have that for you at 1:30 when we come back for our public hearing. But essentially what happened in the road maintenance fund is the state advised us about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, that for this current fiscal year, we would be shorted approximately $200,000 from the revenue that was supposed to come in from the gas taxes for the 12-13 fiscal year. What we're doing is we are essentially rolling those dollars over into next year's budget. We're adding that $200,000 plus or minus from some of our reserves that we have from some of our pooled gas tax dollars. So essentially what we're doing is we're increasing that that value in materials, and it will be it'll be a wash towards next year. We had to account for that money in this current budget process, so you're seeing an elevation of those funding levels. Like I said, I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers for you right now, but I can get those for you at 1:30 if there's any general questions about that. But that's what is the change.
Okay. Any questions from board members?
Just one, Mr. Chair. Steve, so there is no net county cost
That's correct.
for these changes according to our
That's correct.
CAO. So
That is correct. The money that we're using is a gas tax reserve that we have is used for this kind of discrepancy from the state, and essentially we're just accounting for that over the course of the year. We heard about it very late, so we weren't able to put it in the budget that was before you, and we had to change it now through this process to make sure that we were covered in next fiscal year.
Okay, and those numbers, Ray, will be coming in when we approve the final. When we approve the final,
We
Steve,
may have the numbers here. Linda's here.
But I guess my question would be, is that it's going to come, when we approve the final budget, it will be corrected in there or included in there so that we can see those.
That's correct.
Those changes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
And the actual number is $185,000.
185? Okay. Okay, those were all my only questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public?
Actually, Mr. Chair, should I wait till we hear the schedule of fixed assets, or ask the question right now in terms of the vehicles, the $44,000? There's a purchase here that you have for $44,000.
Oh, on the fixed?
Yeah.
Fixed assets.
Is that appropriate talk?
Essentially,
That doesn't matter. I can wait or ask her.
You can answer now.
Might as well go ahead and ask. We could cover the fixed items right now.
What are you going to do with, is it a purchase of a new vehicle to replace
no,
another
actually,
one?
it's equipment for the shop. One is a tire changing unit, basically allow our staff to repair flats and de-rim tires. That'll be purchased for the shop itself, and there'll also be an attachment for the grinder unit that we are intent on demoing to make sure it's to fruition. So it's an attachment that would go on that as well. So it's a grind. It's not a vehicle per se. Okay. It's equipment. One's for the shop, a tire changing machine, and an attachment for the grinder unit that we would look at getting if we.
So that means we'll be using less of the contract services we have right now.
I'm
with
sorry?
the vendor. We'll be using less of their tire services.
That's correct.
That's okay.
Has there been a cost savings analysis done on that, as if we fixed our own tires? Yeah, rather than the.
Yeah, essentially, our ballpark number for tire repair is about $6,000 per year, as what we're spending on tire repair with the nails and various things that happen throughout the county. We can reduce that to essentially cost of materials. The unit itself was $15,000 for that actual tire changing unit. So we anticipate over the course of a couple, 3 years that will pay for itself.
Okay, okay.
How long, what's the lifespan of that equipment?
The equipment, it's an industrial grade equipment as long as you maintain it. I mean, obviously things can break over time, but it's intent to have a lifespan of, up to 10 years.
Okay.
As long as we maintain it, of course.
And I assume we could maybe assist MV Transit with
That is the
tire
goal.
repair as well.
That is the goal, because it would be shared by those units, and we could have some
Okay.
cost savings for both entities.
Including,
That makes sense.
Mr. Chair, including the sheriff department, right? I mean, other agencies too?
The sheriff possibly as well, yes. What we talked about, the primary one that we're looking at were our own public works vehicles, the equipment, as well as the MV Transit. There's been discussion about them either pitching in for a piece of that to be able to use it for their bus vehicles. The sheriffs may be able to use that. They have some special requirements for their tires and vehicles and so forth for certifications, and we'd have to look in that a little closer to make sure that we can actually service that and still maintain that requirement for their high-speed situation.
And we have somebody in-house that can handle that. We would not have to hire someone else.
We need to look at the certifications required for that. Our folks are certified for heavy equipment and for passenger vehicles. I'm not sure, talking here at the podium, whether there's another special requirement for someone who's dealing with a high-speed type pursuit type vehicle that would be having. The consultant that we have right now does have that, does do that for us right now, so we're covered either way. The cost-benefit analysis really looks good for us, the potential of bringing COG in as well. So if they are able to do the sheriff as well, that'd be another bonus and make it even more favorable.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions from public? If not, we'll bring it back to the board. I guess could we approve this item today for a temporary due pass?
Yes.
Yeah.
We're doing item 21, right?
Right, item 21.
I'll move to, for a temporary due pass.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none. Now we're ready for the regular agenda. Budget Unit 55.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so we're going to go ahead and have Melinda Casillas. She's our Management Analyst 3. She's been helping us with the budget. She's going to be discussing this particular item for your board.
Good morning, Melinda.
Sorry. Okay, let's start the regular agenda. Okay, budget unit, I'm sorry, item number 55, budget unit 100, Board of Supervisors. There is no change from last year in this budget unit. Revenues are anticipated at, expenditures are anticipated at $450,248 with no revenues associated with this budget unit. Again, there are no changes from last year's budget, and we would like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? If not, I'll bring back to the board for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move a temporary due pass for budget unit, is it 102? I'm sorry,
100.
100.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to the next one, which would be budget unit 102.
Item number 56, budget unit 102, clerk of the board. There are no changes in this budget from last year. expenditures are in the amount of $163,990 with revenues of $650. Again, there are no changes in this budget unit from last year, and we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board?
Just one, Mr. Chair. Melinda, when there are no changes, but yet there is a higher net county cost, I just want to point out that most of that net county cost is associated with the cost plan.
Correct.
Yeah, and that's going to be across the board. And I
across the
just want the
board.
public to know that it's going to show on there, because there is a difference, but it really is a wash, because we're adding the cost plan, but then it's coming out,
Right.
elsewhere. So,
So for accounting purposes, we added, to the general fund, we added what would be the cost plan if that department had to pay the cost plan. But on the other hand, we increased revenues to offset the expenditures in the general fund. So it is a wash. It's
Right,
kind
and
of
I should-
one pocket going to the
into the other. And I should have pointed that out when we started with the first regular agenda budget unit, which was the Board of Supervisors, because it does look
Right.
like, okay, we have additional,
Right.
raise, but it isn't. It's really the cost plan that is,
That's
that is
the
making
majority of it.
difference.
The other piece of it is, has to do with not having furloughs and allowing step
Yeah,
increases
and
again
I
this year.
understand that that is also part of the equation here, so it's showing again
Right.
as if it's a higher amount for the salaries, but it really is only the furloughs that are
being
affected.
adjusted. Uh-huh.
Thank
Right.
you, Mr.
And so
Chair.
therefore, we didn't really concentrate on net county costs because there were just too many factors
Exactly.
adjusting that.
Yeah, but unless we see something that is different other than those two items,
Right.
Then we obviously, have a change.
Right.
Otherwise, we do not. Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
I'm pleased Supervisor Barrios, you brought that out, because that's a real important fact for the public to understand, the change with that, the cost plan and the furlough type issue as well. And so that's to be reflective on the net county costs, and so that's a good understanding you have right at the start. So, any other questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to Budget Unit 105.
Okay, that's item number 57, County Administrative Office, Budget Unit 105. There is a change this year from last year in this budget unit. There's been a request for Assistant CAO and also to increase a management analyst from a 0.5 to a 0.8. Currently, the department is staffed on temporary help. And so we'd like to address some of these issues in this year's upcoming budget.
Mr. Chair, if I may. There's a couple things, too. As I mentioned in the opening remarks, there's been a reduction in staffing, a lot of retirements. But more importantly, this particular office is the office that really doesn't have an assistant. There's an assistant in a lot of the departments that we have, county council. The auditor has an assistant. The sheriff just reorganized, so he has a few captains. Health and Human Services. So there are different departments that actually do have assistants, and I think it's really important that there's somebody in this office that can assist, especially if there's sickness or if there's vacation, whatever it may be, to be able to assist in the board meetings and as well as just assisting with the workload. So I think it's pretty important.
Yes. And, the administrative office has had, a few retirements, and we're undergoing a lot of changes in the county and how we convey services and partnerships with our two cities, and those are big cost savings and projects that are ongoing, and we're headed in a good positive direction and need a little bit more supportive help there too. Any questions from the board?
Just I want to point something out, Mr. Chair, that we, for the projected 13-14 for this department, we are at $266,964, but the recommended is or not the recommended, but let me look at the title. Yeah, it is the recommended is even with the addition of, looks like 1 3/4 persons, CAO.
That's correct,
It
yeah.
really is only a net county cost of an additional about $33,000.
Yeah.
And that is because we did have some positions open, and so it's going to, we really are not adding in dollars. And I want to point that out because I know there are a lot of other departments out there that have had to lay off, and they do not have, assistance. But this is not going to be as significant considering that we're adding 1 3, I believe 1 3/4 persons to that. So just want to make sure that we highlight it and that the public is aware of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I understand Supervisor Barrios' point, and well taken. However, I would really prefer to wait on this item till tomorrow after closed session, Mr. Chair. And I'll express my opinion in closed session about this department.
Well, for the sake of, transparency of our the budget, I think we, probably should be discussing it, openly, personally. I think that would be better. And, but anyhow, does anyone else on the board feel that this item should be discussed in closed session?
Well, no, Mr. Chair, hold on a minute. I didn't mean that way. What I meant is hold off this item until after we discuss in closed session what the subject matter is in closed session. Then once we come out of closed session, for me, it'll be more clear. And then I feel comfortable voting on this budget item after closed session.
I see. It has to do with the CAO
Yes, it has to do
recruitment.
with the, absolutely.
Mr. Chair, my opinion on that, and I appreciate Supervisor De La Cruz's wanting to do that, but this is a temporary due pass. If we do, we will have possibly changes as we move forward, including what Supervisor De La Cruz is referring to. So we will be able to make those changes before we actually finalize our budget. So I would rather continue with temporary due pass on these items unless the rest of the board is compelled to wait.
Okay. Would any other supervisor like to express their feelings on this? I tend to agree with Supervisor De La Cruz. I mean, Supervisor Barrios, I'm sorry. And, I'm sure we'll be able to talk about it, with our closed session item for tomorrow afternoon, as well as, and clarify, what's going on to the public. But these are budget numbers and positions and what we're.
It
how we
can,
go
it can have a
forward.
bearing on the budget, Mr. Chair. And then once we do a temporary due pass, it's almost impossible to unchange a temporary due pass.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think
It's
so either,
pretty
no.
easy to undo.
We can make an amendment after, or we can make a change after the fact.
Right. So I'll go ahead at this point, entertain any comments from the public on this item. If not, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose?
Aye.
Okay. We'll move on to Budget Unit 58, Agenda item 58, Budget Unit 130, Internal Services.
What page number is that, Mr. Chair?
130 is the budget unit.
Items number 58, 59, and 60, I'd like to kind of discuss those all at the same time. And then we could go back and temporary do pass each budget unit.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
what she's asking is that if we can go ahead and discuss the three items, the next three items, as a whole, because they kind of all are interrelated with each other. And then what she's requesting is that each one, then we'll temporary do pass each one.
So it would be 58, 59, and
58.
60.
That's correct.
Correct.
Page number, Mr. Chair?
Well, yeah, the page numbers.
Page number,
Starting with,
62.
on your budget packet, it would start with page 62. This year, we've kind of combined 130, Department 130, 190, and added a new budget unit, risk internal services funds. And so we took all the employees that were in 130 and 190, and we moved them all into 130. And then 190, which is the risk management budget unit, we have, that is now just the general funds portion of the general liability. And then risk internal services fund is now accounting method for workers' comp and general liability. So we've kind of moved things around there into those different budget units, 130, 190, and the internal service fund. So for internal services, which now houses all of the employees, total expenditures are in the amount of $462,371, and revenues are in the amount of $274,406. Then I'd like to request a temporary do pass on budget unit 130.
okay. My only question was I kind of got diverted in my train of thought. This is questions for just internal services, or
Right.
is this all three items?
This one's just going to be for internal services. So this is just now housing, this is where all the employees that were in 130 and 190, they're all now in 130. And it will just account for, basically for the human services department.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the board?
I have one, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, Melinda, on the professional services, and I think that's probably what you were referring to, it jumps up.
It does. This also accounts for the work that Georgia has been doing for the
Okay,
county.
so this is like an independent contractor, and that's why
Right.
this number is
Right.
higher. Okay, very good. And we're all aware of that, that change, so. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any questions from the public? If not, we can come back to the board and I guess approve temporary do pass on each item individually.
Right.
And we could begin with item 58, budget unit 130.
Temporary do pass for internal services, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. And we'll go on to
Okay, then we'll
item,
go on to item number 59, which is
59.
Budget Unit 190, Risk Management. So this budget is now just the general funds portion of the general liability. So we're estimating that to be at $500,000 with no revenues associated.
So the non-general fund accounts will pick up the...
This is, that will be moved into the Risk Internal Services Fund.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Not, we'll move back to the board for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, so then item 160, which is Risk Internal Services Fund on page 65 of your budget packet. This is the new fund that we created to account, we feel will be a better accounting process for workers' comp and the entire county's general liability. And that would be in the amount of $1,943,910 with revenues of $1,294,271. It shows a net county cost or fund balance of $649,639. There actually won't be a net county cost. Will be portion of this money is at Trindell already, and so we'll just be using some of those funds this year. We're anticipating it to be a year or two before all of this kind of fleshes out and doesn't show any net county cost. But there's not actually going to be a cost to the county.
Now, Mr. Chair, with that being said, does that mean then that we can expect to have that additional monies available for the general fund of $600,000?
No, this is just to take care of that. This fund will be operating all by itself. It just might take, because it's run through the cost plan, it might take a year or two to get it all squared away. But in the meantime, it's basically just working with the Trindell group.
So it isn't monies that are sitting there for the, it's really more of a balancing number, and it's not actual dollars that we
No,
have
it's not.
available to us to
Correct.
use. Okay. And that usually is the way it works with this
Yeah.
department. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for temporary due pass.
Move for temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Move on to 61, Budget Unit 106.
Okay, item number 61, Information Technology, which is Budget Unit 106, and it's page 67 in your budget packet. Information Technology has a change this year from last year. We're requesting one additional technician that will basically be housed at Human Services and Behavioral Health, and they will be offsetting that cost in revenue from HSA and Behavioral Health. Total expenditures are $492,696 with revenues of $130,000. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? I'll entertain a motion for a temporary due pass.
Temporary due pass, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Item 62, 107, GIS.
Item number 62, GIS, which is Budget Unit 107 and found on page 69 in your budget packet. GIS, there are no changes this year from last year's budget unit. Total expenditures are $128,682 with revenues of $90,914. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board? I might have one question here. Let me see. On the revenues, the other jurisdictions, they're pretty good at reimbursing us for these services. Is this?
Yes, the members, agencies to the GIS enterprise, we agree to the expense each year, and the revenues offset are agreed to among the parties. So there's actually a committee that has is an advisory committee to all the jurisdictions involved. So,
Okay,
yes.
and so we're pretty careful as far as recovering actual costs of the time that we're allocating towards, providing that.
Right, we're trying to allocate services to each, and as maps are added, those agencies that are using the service will be charged for those services also.
Okay, very good. I just had to ask that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
CAO
Yeah, and just to
Espinoza?
add to that, so we've been more diligent with that, especially in the last year with printing large maps or doing a few, things, helping other jurisdictions that maybe are not part of that committee that are being reimbursed. We're definitely being more proactive in billing and receiving funds for that. So we have been doing that.
Okay, very good. Any questions, comments from the public? Come step forward, Mr. Jones.
What's GIS?
Please come to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. There are a few acronyms in the world that I don't have committed to memory. What's GIS? Thank you.
Dr.
Mr.
Jones, you ought to know that.
Mr.
CAO Espinoza.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's Geographic Information System, and that is actually what we use for documenting address of homes, street maps, infrastructure, those types of things.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because on the computer, you could go to these programs and you have these overlay, and the map would overlay and different jurisdictional lines and things like that. CAO?
Yeah, in addition to that, even your districts that you see on our website was using the GIS information system to allocate the residents, and then we went ahead and mapped that out. So that's what GIS does for you.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Any other questions from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none, we'll move on to item 63, Budget Unit 109, the County Council.
Okay, item number 63, County Council Budget Unit 109, found on page 45 of your budget packet. County Council has a small change this year. They're increasing an attorney by 0.1. This attorney is currently works out at HSA and Behavioral Health, and they want to increase this position a small amount to a 0.8, and that additional cost will be offset by revenues that will be covered by HSA and Behavioral Health. Total expenditures are $610,436 with revenues of $305,431. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay, any questions from the board?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Melinda. But I thought the revenues should be higher because we are going to get the reimbursement from HHSA, but it's not showing a higher amount. Is there a reason why? Because it's the same as the year before.
Right, I understand. I see that. The revenues were provided by county council, so I don't know if there's. Barbara?
There's two different ways that we account for revenue. The first one, it depends on whether it's an internal county department or whether it's an external agency such as LAFCO. And for the internal county departments such as Behavioral Health and Health and Human Services, we count for it in the, up in the salary. It's the interdepartmental label transfer, and we did increase.
So it's in the negative, okay.
Yeah,
I
it
remember
accounts for the
seeing
salary
those.
savings.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding me about that, because as we move through these, when there are interdepartmental labor transfers, we will see them up on the salary side as a minus. And so that's the offset from, within the county departments.
Yes.
One paying for a position or part of a position.
Right.
will show.
It decreases our salary expenses.
Decreases the
Yes.
salary. So, okay, thank you for reminding me about that. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
you're very welcome. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? I guess we'll come back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Number 64, Budget Unit 112, the treasurer.
Okay, item number 64, the Treasurer's Department, Budget Unit 112 on page 53 of your packet. There has been a change in this budget unit since we last met on 5/28. The Treasurer's Department should actually have a net county cost of 0. Except in this year's case, we would add the amount of the cost plan charges. And so we made an adjustment to this budget unit so that the net county cost is now the cost plan charge of $22,502. So total expenditures are $339,693 with revenues of $317,191, leaving the net county cost. In this case, we did look at the net county cost of $22,502. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass. That shows on the contingency paper that we provided you with an update of where we were on May 28th to today.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question on that because that's the first item on the contingency correction or contingency changes. And because it is the first item, the number is different, and I'm just wondering why this is showing 60,000 change, but this is, but on the sheet is showing 60,000, but on the computer it's showing 22,000. I don't see where the difference is.
We went from a negative 21,000 to a positive.
Oh, got it, okay. So
22,000.
that would make up the difference
Right.
on the
Right.
on the $40,000 difference from what you're showing on this sheet
Right.
and on here. Okay. And it's all tied in. Now, will all of these be tied into the cost plan, the contingencies that we have?
No.
No, but
No,
this
not
one
all those
is.
changes on there are, no.
Okay,
But this particular one should have been a net county cost of just the cost plan,
okay, which it is now.
which it is now.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still a little bit lost on that one myself.
The
'Cause it's
treasurer's-
60,000. I'm still lost about 20,000 in my head.
Okay, the Treasurer's Department should basically offset itself with revenue. And I didn't catch that on the first go-around when we met, and the treasurer pointed that out to me, is that the revenue in their department and the expenditures should basically be 0. This year, however, we added in cost plan charges. So the cost plan, so the net county cost should be equal to the cost plan that we added in this year. And on the first time that we met in May, that it did not show that way. So I had to make the adjustment since then in the net county cost. So that also unfortunately changed the contingency amount because the department was showing itself basically as making revenue for the county, and that's not necessarily the case.
Is there a chance that we could get it down to kind of a lower net county cost for this coming year, or it's just?
This department basically operates on a zero net county cost. Whatever their expenditures are, they're covered by their revenues.
Any other questions? Any questions from the public? If not, we'll bring it back for a vote for a temporary due pass.
Move for temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none. Now we could move on to item 65, Budget Unit 116, the tax collector.
Okay, the tax collector, which is found on page 56 in your budget packet. There is a change in the request for FTEs this year. There was a .5 accounting technician approved from last year, and we've increased that to a 1.0 full FTE. It was felt that the .5 was a little difficult to fill, and by increasing it to a 1.0, the tax collector felt they could use this position to work on their backlog. There's a backlog of unsecured property taxes that have not been basically pursued, and the tax collector felt that this position could also work on the backlog and pursue the unsecured delinquent property taxes. And so we're requesting this position to be increased to a full one-time 1.0 position.
Supervisor Barrios?
Mr. Chair, this is one of the changes or the positions that we're adding that will actually equate to additional
Revenue.
monies for the county.
Yeah.
Because these monies are sitting out there, they're not aggressively, because we don't have enough
Not
staff,
really. Correct.
are being pursued. And people will probably pay them if we put enough pressure on them and do whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, you.
One other thing, too, we added as a requirement to this is to have a regular update on where we're at and tracking measures of how we're doing with, receiving those tax incomes. So we'll probably be bringing that back to your board as well. That way you'll see where we're at with the tracking on that.
Yeah, very good.
And I think that's a great idea, because if we're going to make these changes, they have to be, we have to be able to assess if it's making a difference with the additional bodies that we have out there.
Oh, absolutely. We don't want to chase 25 cents and spend $1.
Exactly. So thank you for that. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair.
Thank you. Any
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor De La Cruz?
So that means that when we revisit it again next year and we find out that, it is making profit and maybe we might actually need to hire more, or the other way around, then this will be the time that we say, we need to cut that or increase that.
Yeah, and throughout the year, we're going to be analyzing that. So we'll be bringing back a quarterly report to see how we're doing tracking, and we'll probably have a better idea, sooner than even a year down the road where we're going to be standing at. Yeah.
I think, I'm going to put a plug in. That's why adding the position that Supervisor Barrios and to this department to collect the funds, but we also have to have the ability administratively to make sure that's being done and an analysis taking place that it's cost effective and why we need a little bit more help at maybe an assistant CAO position. And that's it all. It's supposed to all come together.
Yeah.
So, okay, very good. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion on a temporary due pass.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Move on to number 66, Budget Unit 114, the assessor.
Okay, the assessor's budget unit is found on page 59 in your budget packet. There was a change in the assessor's budget from last year. The assessor asked for 2 additional temporary positions. Again, in relation to the tax collector's office, the assessor's office felt they needed needed more temporary help in order to work on the property tax rolls, to work on the backlog, but also in anticipation that the housing industry seems to be moving forward this year, and he felt that that would help him to both address the backlog plus the current housing conditions. Expenditures are in the amount of $1,578,144, with revenues of $487,640. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios.
Thank you. Melinda, you know, even though we're adding, it doesn't show authorized FTE positions increasing from before. Is it that these are contractual, it's contractual help?
This would be temporary help. So they do not show as authorized positions because they're just on a temporary basis.
Okay, so then it will only show up on top as it does with the
On the
increase
temporary
in this temporary
salaries.
salaries. Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Supervisor De La Cruz.
well, maybe to understand why, because of the cost plan A87, I'm looking at 11, 12, and it's 15 positions, and right now there are 10, and if you look at total salaries, almost, you know, in terms of just regular salaries, it's almost the same. But then the A87 picks it up, so, poor Tommy gets it both. He gets it from an expense and from an employee perspective. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board.
Move for temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to the 67, Budget Unit 110, the auditor.
The auditor's budget can be found on page 48 of your budget packet. There is a change this year in the auditor's request. We've added, we've increased the FTEs. We've added a 1.4 in accountants, staff accountants, and then a small 0.05 in computer technician. Currently, there are not any staff accountants in the auditor's office, and to address the financial system of the county, we've requested an additional FTEs. The Total expenditures are $1,109,084, with revenues of $594,759. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair. This is another department, just like the assessors as well, as where we are losing money by not having the appropriate level of staffing there. And so I think, well, in this case, not only will we not lose money because we'll have people in the office doing the right thing for the county, but we are showing additional revenues of about $80,000. Now, is the revenue as a result of having the additional employee?
Some of that revenue is tied to an anticipated increase in property taxes, and the auditor's office receives revenue from the collection of those property taxes.
Okay.
They charge the different agencies that they collect the taxes, that the taxes are collected for, and then they disperse them out. So there's that also includes a projection of increased property tax collections.
Okay. So again, I just want to reiterate that this is an area where having the additional staff will help us to not lose money and actually make money, so.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a good point out. You know, last year or the last couple of years, we've had to lay off a number of staff people, and now we're trying to prioritize what we're bringing back in the most effective, efficient fashion to, you know, capitalize on, you know, how we could increase revenues and increase our level of services across the board. Any other questions from the CEO Espinoza?
One thing I want to add to this as well is we were very close to not submitting our CAFR on time. So that could be really detrimental to our county as well. So it's really important that we need to focus in, as I mentioned earlier in opening comments, that we need to really focus in, you know, where our trouble spots are at, and this is one of them. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair, that this department has really, I mean, they were working during the holidays that we had. While we were enjoying our holidays, they were sitting here working, trying to meet deadlines, and that's commendable. So I think this is actually, you know, not that the other departments do not deserve to get additional help, but we are aware that that was happening. And it was unfortunate, but the deadlines were met. And so I'm glad that we're moving forward with this.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I agree, and it wasn't a run-of-the-mill holiday. It was Easter holiday, and you know, those are pretty special days. Anyway, I'm happy you brought that point up, and because people need to know. Any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move a temporary due pass, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Move to item 68, Budget Unit 114, the elections.
That was actually a typo. It should be Budget Unit 140 is elections. And if I'd like to take item number 68, 69, and 70 all together, elections, the county clerk, and the county recorder, as those departments are all in one office and they work together. Elections, the county clerk and the county recorder are moving some people around, and ultimately there's I believe 3 new positions, 2 deputy clerks and a computer technician. And so you'll see a little bit of changes in some of their FTEs. And their additional employees will be offset by revenue. There was a change a couple of weeks ago to the I believe it was the county clerk or the county recorder's fee schedule, and that allowed them to make some of these additions. So then we'll go and take each budget unit separately. Elections, budget unit 140. Total expenditures are $567,265 with revenues of $45,000. I'd like to request temporary pass on elections.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question
Yes.
here? This one has confused me a little bit on the revenue side of it. We were looking at 252,000 projected for 12-13. We're down to 45. But yet, the expenses are less. So could you just kind of summarize that for me a little bit?
Joe Paul Gonzalez, County Registrar. I just wanted to point out to the board that elections, as you may recall, is a 2-year election cycle. So 1 year we can charge for elections, and the next year we can't because there's state mandated elections. So we really can't recover any costs. So in this new fiscal year coming up, 13-14, we will have very little opportunity to recover costs. Following year, that's when we can actually recover costs, more of our costs.
So Joe Paul, then, in the 387 net county cost was a year that 358, which that was, we recovered our elections monies in 12-13. So what you're saying that in 13-14, the additional, besides the cost plan, the additional amount that is in there is that we're not going to be able to recover.
That's right. Our revenue recovery opportunities are less.
Okay. So that's substantial.
Yes,
So
it
that'll
is.
have to come out of your budget without recovery from anything because they are not state elections. Is that correct?
Yes, for the most part,
For the most
that's
part.
correct, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from board members? I have a question while I have you, and on the revenue side of it, similar to what I asked about GSI, do we kind of have a late analysis of our cost to pass on to the special districts and other jurisdictions?
Well, recall that, I believe it was January of this year, I came to this board with a change in our fee schedules for elections, for the recorder's office and the clerk. We brought in new rates, and those rates are what what the board has adopted, and those are what we charge for services related to, in this case, in elections. We also have the board adopted rates associated with the charges for election services. And the quick answer to your question is, when a special district comes before us and asks for to put an election on their behalf, we charge them. They are a chargeable jurisdiction.
Okay. And then the other question in regards to revenues is, can we consolidate some of the voting districts, or like in my case, in my district, you have a voting place, polling place at the Vets Hall, and for the city you have it at the school. Why not just have both of them at the same location? And I know the line might get a little bit longer, but it's not that bad.
For that question, I think I'll defer to my assistant, Angela Curl, to answer that question.
Actually, we were able to benefit on cost savings in the November consolidations. We consolidated more polling places than we'd ever done before, and it did show a definite reduction in cost. We did have one polling place that was with a line. It was at the Rancho School, and it did have quite an extensive line. We're going to work on that, but we do look at that when we are looking at consolidations. The problem is we can't predict what's going to be on the ballot until the candidates file and the contests are actually defined. One of the other things I want to point out is the revenues in this fiscal year, because we have no school districts, we have no special districts, we only have county cost and state cost, which unfortunately comes out of the pocket of the county. Additionally, this is a more expensive election. It is the first top two primary that will be statewide. If you recall, in the last primary election, we had the top two primary, which was for the U.S. Senate race, and you saw that gigantic list of candidates for U.S. Senate. Imagine that for every single race across the state. So our projections of number of ballots has increased substantially because we don't know how big it's going to be.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, thank you. A lot of things that, you know, people don't think about. Any other comments or questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Bring it back to a temporary due pass.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to number 69, Budget Unit 259, the county clerk.
County Clerk's budget unit can be found on page 125 of your budget packet. The total expenditures amount to $51,510 and revenues in the amount of $38,000. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
What is the page again, Melinda, please?
I'm sorry, page 125.
125. Thank you.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board for a temporary due pass.
Move for temporary due pass.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll be taking a break at 10:30 for a few minutes, but in the meantime, I think we could keep moving forward. Maybe we'll take a break after this one. That's what we'll do. We'll move on to item 70, Budget Unit 260.
The county recorder can be found on page 128 of your budget packet. The recorder's office total expenditures are $456,670 with revenues of $392,040. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Any questions from the public? Comments? Seeing none, I'll bring them back to the board for a motion.
Temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. With that, we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you. It's not Joe. Ms. Casillas, we'll continue on item number 71, Budget Unit 206, the District Attorney.
But Melinda, can you turn on the mic? You probably need to turn it on as well. Thanks.
At least that's where my page left off at, 71.
Okay. Okay, District Attorney can be found on page 86 of your budget packet. There are no changes to this budget unit this year over last year. Expenditures are in the amount of $1,246,003 with revenues of $95,000. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Mr. Chair, is that, last year was it 8 or 6 FTEs?
Projected to be 8,
Okay.
but actually authorized for 9.
Okay, so it projected and adopted, okay, and then okay.
Okay.
So what has increased is the 87 plan?
No, the adopted last year was 9 FTEs, and also again this year, 9 FTEs. I believe they didn't fill one position as a permanent position. I believe they've been using a temporary person to replace that one position that they are projected at, but haven't actually filled it, but they used a temporary person for that.
Okay. Any other questions, Supervisor De La Cruz?
No.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chair, temporary due pass.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to 72, 207, Public Defender.
What page is that, Mr. Chair?
Public Defender can be found on page 92 of your budget packet. There are no changes this year over last year. Total expenditures are $1,040,944 with revenues of $15,000. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Supervisor Barrios, we've been working on a committee. Maybe you could summarize what you and I have been working on along with the county council staff.
Yeah, a while back, we were appointed, our chair, Botello, and myself, to look at ways where we could save in the public defender's budget. And we do have some ideas coming forward. We have met with our county council together with the public defenders and have come up, shared ideas, and we're all in agreement that we may have a means of saving money. I know this is not reflected in this budget, but I believe that we could save about $100,000, and this is primarily to go out and cap the, and we haven't, actually finalized this, but we're hoping that this will come before our final budget adoption, where we can present that savings, where we would save in the third tier, is that correct? Third tier council. And so that is the idea that we would like to present. I know we would, at this time, because we are during this budget process, that we can give direction to our CAO to put out an RFP for that savings. So, but until that happens, it's a process. It'll probably take 30 to, I'm guessing it'll take 30 to 60 days for this to take place. So if we can direct him to move forward with that RFP for the third tier attorney fees,
Right.
then...
Yeah, what the subcommittee found and discovered is that, the costs of providing public defendant services, we're spending probably make it very simple, rough numbers without getting too detailed. Out of this $1 million, on the first and second tier public defense, where is about 1/3 of that cost. The third tier conflict attorneys are costing, and investigation is costing 2/3 of that figure for 1/3 of the cases. And so what we want to do is have some limitations as far as the cost per case at the third tier representation. I hope I explained that right. County Council?
Yeah, that's an accurate explanation, Mr. Chair. The bottom line being that the majority of the county's costs are being spent in cases beyond our public defender, which is Mr. LaForge, and our first alternate conflict, which is Mr. Damkar. They cover about 90% of the cases for 50% of the cost, so that means 10% of the cases are being covered for the other 50% of the cost, and that's obviously out of proportion.
So in a nutshell, we would like to contract that third level conflict cases.
Yeah. And the good thing about this, and I want to point out that we met with a judge as well, and we were all in agreement this would be about the best place for us to experience the savings. So I believe that we will get it, but we do, like I said, need to get the approval of the board to move forward with that RFP.
So
And I believe we can do that now because it is part of the budget process, and
So at the moment, the target goal is to bring back to this board for full consideration on July 9th, the first meeting in July, the RFP, and then allow the board to have a discussion then and provide staff with direction and approve the RFP process if that's the wishes of the board.
do we need a motion, Council, in order to move forward with that?
No, you've already directed it for staff to bring back, and as I've told you, we were targeting it for July 9th.
Okay.
So.
So we just want to make sure that the board is aware of how we're moving forward with this through the ad hoc committee.
Mr. Chair, County Council, by doing an RFP, it would invite outside this community lawyers, right?
Well, it's the intent of staff, and of course, the board has the final word on this, but it would be the intent of staff to distribute the RFP as wide as possible. So right now, we're looking at this to go to Fresno County, Santa Clara, Monterey, Santa Cruz, so all the surrounding neighborhoods. It would not just be an RFP that was kept within the county. If the board wants to change that or narrow the scope or expand the scope, that's up to the board.
Okay. Well, I guess we look at it, the bottom line dollar, and somebody from Fresno, wishes to grab this, and they want to consider fuel and traveling expenses in their budget. That's something that we said, hey, tough. That's the beauty of selecting local individuals.
Right. So the way it's currently contemplated, again, is that how it would come to the board is that the third level conflict, or the alternate second level conflict, depending on how you want to look at it, would be done for a flat fee. So whoever took this contract, they would get paid one sum, and how they paid for their overhead and their fuel costs and their travel and all that would be
Now, would they be required to submit reports to which maybe some of these cases can be reimbursed by the state or the federal government?
We're looking at that. I think those issues, some of the bigger issues, cost recovery, we're probably going to have to look towards the primary public defender's contract, since it's the primary public defender and Mr. Damkar is the alternate that handles 90% of the cases. So cost recovery, to the extent that it exists, is going to come from the public defender's office. So when we, again, look to bid the public defender's contract, which currently expires in June of 2014, I think this board is going to want to think about how they want to approach public defender services in the future, including such items as cost recovery services, and that's probably going to profoundly affect how we go out to bid in June of 2014. So that's kind of another discussion for another day. First things first, we just need to get some contracts in place with the people that are already serving representing the county. So.
Yeah, it's the committee's intention to have the item placed on the July 9th meeting, and we were hoping to prepare and be prepared to go for an RFP so we could realize the savings sooner than later, and maybe get into some of the details that the county council had mentioned as far as what our thinking is going forward with public defense.
Yeah. And Mr. Chair, if I could, even if we approve the budget, temporary due pass as it is right now, if we experience that savings later and find that that is will happen, then we will bring it back certainly to show that we have these additional funds for other county, for the general fund.
That's right.
For other expenses.
Okay. Any other questions, comments from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to item 73, Budget Unit 210, with Sheriff's Operations.
What page number, Mr.
Okay, the sheriff's operation budget can be found on page 94 of your budget packet. Since our meeting in May 28th, we increased salaries by $50,000 due to a possible retirement in that department, and then we reduced contingencies by $50,000. Felt that it was more appropriate to show contingencies as to what they actually are, rather than give a false indication of the amount that's in contingencies, because we did have this number available to us. So we've increased salaries by what we anticipate to be a retirement payoff. And so total expenditures are in the amount of $4,770,718 with revenues of $1,151,818. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions from the board or comments?
Well, Mr. Chair, I was, one of those rare moments where I actually get to read a freelance. I was reading that there might actually be a positive opportunity that the city and the county can work together in terms of sheriff and police department, and I see that by the county offering services, we could almost save, between $1 million, maybe $2 million, and we still need to see the results from the police report and see what they can offer the county, and can they match that $1 million, $2 million. So I understand it's a temporary due pass, and I understand that pretty soon we'll approve this whole budget as a whole, and we will be able to make adjustments if down the road if it goes in that direction, Ray?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, we will be able to make adjustments, and currently right now we're working with the ad hoc committee with this, and the sheriff has given us a snapshot, a kind of a high-level view of the potential contract, what it would look like, with the potential savings for the city, as well as being able to help with the safety in our environment, as well as within the county itself, for streamlining safety services. So we are in the process of it. We're working on it, but we don't have anything tangible yet, and really be able to put anything in the budget now. But we can come back later and make an amendment, or at least show the board, what those would be, what those numbers would be.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I could, it is going to be a little, it's going to be a process that is not going to happen quickly before this budget. Maybe, it's going to take several months, because the city is not planning to come back with a proposal until after the rally, and that's another 3 weeks from now. They're busy with that, and we understand it. And so even though we've gotten that snapshot from our sheriff and we've directed him to give it to us, we still need to hear from the city and then compare the two, sit at the table across each other and figure out what might work and what might not work. So yeah, it's going to be a process. So for now, it's not going to have any effect on our
That's right.
on our current budget. So
Thank you. Any other questions from the board or comments? Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Motion for temporary due pass, Mr. Chairman.
second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to number 74, Budget Unit 220.
Okay, in the Corrections Division, which is located on page 98 of your budget packet, there's actually been quite a few changes in this budget unit since the May 28th meeting. Per your direction, we added another corrections officer. There was also, due to an upcoming MOU agreement, there was an adjustment in regular salaries for that also. Overtime was reduced based upon projections that the sheriff provided. By adding another correctional officer, they felt that they could reduce the overtime. And then we also added $10,000 for a safety glass at the jail. So total expenditures are now $4,704,604 with revenues of $674,451. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Temporary due pass, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to item 75, Budget Unit 263 on page 100, the Office of Emergency Services. Melinda?
Okay, Office of Emergency Services, Budget Unit 263, page 100 of your budget packet. There are no changes in this budget unit from last year. Total expenditures are $275,352 with revenues of $228,529. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Melinda, why is this one, I know the salaries are showing about the same, but we've got, not including the cost plan, we actually do have a substantial lesser amount for the expenses by about $120,000.
And the special departmental expense,
Yeah.
Margie could probably give you better detail on that.
I mean, that's always good, but I'm sure that it's going someplace else, so it's going to be showing in another department.
Those are for grants, the Homeland Security grants and grants that are managed by OES. In the special department expense, those are your yearly grants that are received, and so
Okay.
they're reflected in that line item.
Yeah, so I see that where the revenues are down by almost exactly the same amount then, okay.
Right.
So does that mean, Margie, that we are not going to be able to, plan as we have in the past, where we won't be able to provide the maybe programs or training that we have provided?
The Homeland Security funds have come down substantially each year as we go on, and luckily for us, we were able to do most of our narrow banding through this Homeland Security grant funding. So this year, there'll be less expenditures, and primarily those are equipment. Might be some radios for the Sheriff's Department and other agencies, and/or some planning and some training, but it'll be less, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to probation, which is number 76, Budget Unit 224.
Probation Department 124 can be found on page 109 of your budget packet. Since the meeting of May 28th, there's been a change in salaries. This again is due to an upcoming change in the MOU. And so expenditures are $2,288,935 with revenues of $1,288,232. And we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll do number 77. That's on page 111.
The juvenile detention facility, there was a change from the last budget, the meeting on May 28th, in regular salaries. Also, this was due to a change in, upcoming change in the MOU. Total expenditures are $1,596,956 with revenues of $51,150. I'd like to request a temporary due pass. There are no changes other than that MOU change from last year.
Okay. Any questions from the board on this? Any questions from the public? Before I take a vote, I just want to note that our probation chief is moving on to a new opportunity, and with the previous budget unit and this one here, the probation and juvenile detention facility, I just want to note that he's done a fantastic job while he's been here, and we certainly appreciate his service to San Bernardino County, and I'm sure we'll have a plaque for you at a later date during the meeting and give you the appropriate recognition you deserve, but we're certainly going to miss his service and appreciate all the efforts that he's done for us. With that, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to number 78, Budget Unit 160, Buildings and Grounds Maintenance.
Okay, Budget Unit 160, the Buildings and Ground Maintenance, found on page 77 of your budget packet. Since the May 28th meeting, there's been a change due to the signing or the approval of the janitorial maintenance contract for general fund departments. And expenditures are in the amount of $392,807 with revenues of $5,000. There was a change in this budget unit from last year in that we removed the utilities out of this department, and we set up a new department, which will be the next item, Budget Unit 165, which will now be just utilities, and this department does not have utilities in it anymore. To request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, temporary do pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Move on to, I guess, utilities.
Item number 79, countywide utilities, budget unit 165 on page 79 of your budget packet. As I previously said, this is a new budget unit this year, and we removed the utilities out of budget unit 160, and now they are just housed in budget unit 165. We also moved all the historical data in there for your reference. Total expenditures are $273,000, and there are no revenues associated with this department. I'd like to request a temporary do pass.
Any questions?
Well, Mr. Chair, I really do want Steve to justify why we got to have this department here. I'm just joking, Steve.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Supervisor Munzer?
Just a comment, and I think we talked about this at last budget time. I really would like, and it's probably going to fall upon Steve or his department, to find out if we can do any cost savings on our utilities countywide, either solar projects, something more, of efficiency type, but just something where this budget unit just doesn't automatically increase year after year after year, and that it's watched and ideas are brought forward for cost savings for this budget item.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. I know, what was it, Steve, about a year ago, that, or maybe less, that we did do some, I was introduced to somebody with solar power, and we were looking into doing some sort of solar project for our property on technology and maybe the jail.
Yeah, that is correct. We are constantly looking for different opportunities for either solar or the partnerships that we can do to make ourselves more energy efficient. We're actually still pursuing grants and processes through AMBAG and through other regional agencies to try to make sure that we're as efficient as possible. So yes, and we will get back to you. The short answer is yes, that it will fall under my department, and yes, we will bring back probably semi-annual reports or quarterly reports to the board about our progress about going towards that being energy efficient as possible.
Yeah, and I think we just have to be, vigilant as far as other opportunities as they pop up. And we did a analysis and on the solar part of it, and what made it difficult, to correct me if I'm wrong, was that our facilities are so separated that doesn't help us at all either, and it's tough to plug in jointly, but. Yes. We'll keep looking.
And one of the things that is an energy center is the jail, and as we look to the process and that project moving forward, that's going to be one of the key areas that we'll be able to, we believe, be able to reconfigure how the current jail and the new jail will get their power. So as that'll be the major point that we're looking forward to. And we also have another energy survey coming through the various departments to take this opportunity to let them know that we'll be doing another survey through the departments to make sure that we can get as energy efficient as possible to go up to more grant dollars.
And Mr. Chair, if I could, we had a survey done, how long ago, Steve? Maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
It's been about
where
3
looked-
years.
About 3 years, where they looked at every department. We got back the survey. Did we actually put that into place?
Yes, we did. We were able to implement about 75% of what was recommended in that process. There were some fixtures that we had some issues trying to accommodate, actually at the jail. But we are going through the process again and going to hit it with another vigor and try to get better than 75% completion of the recommendations made by that survey.
Very good. So it's an ongoing process.
Yes,
Thank
it's a
you, Mr. Chair.
refinement,
Yes. And I have one question. With the well going in at Vets Park, would this be reflected as far as the well cost, the standby charge, and the electricity that's required to pump water?
The initial thought for that process is that that would be considered, but that energy has a revenue source by the users who'll be out there paying the fees for it, so that should be a net zero amount. So the thought process would carry that energy cost and the revenue to support it into those budget units.
Any other questions? Any questions, comments from the public? If not, bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Item number 80, Budget Unit 256, Public Works Administration and Engineering.
Budget Unit 256 is found on page 145 of your budget packet. There are no changes in this department from previous years. Expenditures are in the amount of $471,370 with revenues of $200,000. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions?
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Melinda, you said that there was not much change, but there is a change in FTEs.
Oh, I apologize. The Public Works Department has approximately 5 or 6 departments, and they adjusted around some of their FTEs this year.
Oh, okay, so they're just going to end up in another part
It's in
of that.
another department.
And I do remember that they were trying to get to try to get more specific with where the costs were
actually
related
occurring.
to the different areas.
Correct.
To balance it, so, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? No. Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll have a motion here.
Move for temporary due pass?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none, we'll move on to item 81, Budget Unit 700, Veterans Park.
Vets Memorial Park Budget Unit 700 is found on page 233 of your budget packet. There are no changes in this budget unit from last year. And expenditures are $134,110 with revenues of $65,000. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll come back to the board for a motion.
Temporary due pass, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to Parks and Rec. 82, Budget Unit 702.
And that budget unit can be found on page 235 of your budget packet. There are no changes in this budget unit from last year. Expenditures are $73,626 with revenues of $16,775. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Parks.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? That will bring it back for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to another section, Agricultural Commissioner and Sealer of Weights and Measures, item 83, and Budget Unit 250.
That budget unit can be found on page 115 of your budget packet. Since the meeting May 28th, there's been a change in the FTEs from the Agricultural Commissioner to the Mosquito Abatement. With an anticipated retirement, the Ag Commissioner had a few changes within his department with the FTEs, and that also impacted the mosquito abatement program. It actually reduced the general fund's cost by roughly $11,000. And so total expenditures are $829,214 with revenues of $607,250. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay, any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, there is a substantial net county cost on this, and I know that the cost plan is included in there, but that was $60,000. What is the major difference there, Melinda? It isn't on the expenses, on the regular services, and it doesn't appear to be in the salaries. Let me go down. I must be missing something here. And this is, and the contingency change was minor. It was only minor compared to some of the others, 8,600 to the good.
Do you want to talk to me? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like the revenues are down that much.
Yeah, there's some revenues that are anticipated to be down this next year. One of the things is that we get a substantial amount of funding from the state, and what it is basically is a reimbursement. Now, our expenses were down this last fiscal year, so we're going to end up getting less money from the state. So part of it is because we don't spend the money, then we get less reimbursement. Another portion that's a little more significant than that is that we have fees for export certification, where companies, agricultural companies that desire to send their products overseas require an inspection and certification from our department. And we have one large, there's several companies that do it, but the largest one is doing a remodeling job on their facility. So temporarily, a lot of those inspections will be done in Monterey County. So we'll have less work over there, but it's anticipated that once the remodeling is done, then it'll be business as usual. So that's why there's less revenues.
Okay, Supervisor Munzer?
So is this a net county cost, or is this a use of fund balance?
No, this is actual. This is
actual?
No, we don't have mosquitoes as fund balance. This is actually this is the net county cost.
Okay, all right. Because the way this agenda is put out, the use of fund balance and net county cost is on the same line. We actually talked about that last year because it was a little bit confusing, because sometimes it was a fund balance would show up instead of an actual net county cost. And we actually talked about changing that for this year, but I guess it didn't happen. But this is true net county cost.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? So I'm just trying, so the revenues are off because of some state funding was cut.
Well, basically what it amounts to is if we have a net county cost, we get partial reimbursement from the state on that. Last year, well, this year that we're in right now, is the Wildlife Services program was cut back. So there's less, the county is paying less money because they don't have that program anymore, which equates to less reimbursement. So while we're able to save some money for short term, for not having the Wildlife Services program, then the result is for this next year we get less reimbursement. So yes, we did save some money, not the entire amount, because we're going to be a little short on revenues for this year.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, when you look at this, it's a little bit harder to, you know what it's about, but we're trying to understand it because it looks like a pretty big increase, you know, above and beyond 87. And then you see the revenues falling that far, and if we're providing the same level, you know, I wouldn't put it past the state that they mandate a service, they're obligated to pay for that service, then they cut the funding for that service, and we get stuck to maintaining, you know, that obligation.
Well, in this particular case, it's actually the county decided to cut back the service, so there's not less reimbursement. You know, it was the county's choice to reduce that service, Wildlife Services, which was the federal trapper. So since we didn't spend the money, then we're getting less reimbursement that we normally have been over the last past years. So that's why you're going to see less revenue.
Okay.
One of the reasons. Did I explain that right? It's a little confusing thing, because it has to do with what you do one year could impact the revenue for the next year, and that's what we're seeing right now.
And we can't cut on the revenue side, on the expenditure side, what the revenue's short.
Well, we're pretty much down to just, the reason we cut wildlife service is because it was a non-mandated program. And everything else that we're doing right now is we're pretty much down just to the programs that are mandated by state law or have cost recovery. Now, there's one thing that's not shown on here is that since the budget was prepared, it does look like we're going to additional $23,000 in extra revenue this next year, but it's too late to, by the time it looked at that, it's actually, this was already published. So there's a couple of factors in here. That's probably not the true amount, because we are expecting at least another $23,000 in revenue. Plus we have these shortfalls they're probably pertain only this year only.
Don't look at me, Anthony.
All right. Any other questions from the board?
How quickly can we get the trapper back, and then our revenues will be up?
Actually, after the mountain lion sighting down there at Brigantino Park, we talked about it a little bit. And now I guess the federal government has increased the cost of the trapping program even more so, and so it would be hard for us to catch up. But is the inspection fees keeping up with, and costs keeping up with what we charge for them?
Yeah, actually, like a majority of our fees for inspection has to do with the export certification, and they're in line with the rest of the counties. And the study was done several years ago, but our costs really haven't increased very much. And it's one of the things to look at each year is, like, do we have an opportunity to increase fees? Can we, by statute and so forth? And I believe we're right on the target with this thing. It's just that we have a temporary decrease in inspection work, which should pick up again next spring. I kind of went on the conservative side here because I don't want to try to guess that. It all depends on when they do the remodeling, when they're finished, but they're supposedly by next spring that they'll be back in operation. So I think this is just a one-year glitch.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? If not, we'll bring it back for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Well, thank you, Ron. We'll move on to 84, Budget Unit 265, Planning and Building.
Okay, the Planning and Building Services Department can be found on page 133 of your budget packet. There are no changes in this year's budget unit over last year. Total expenditures are in the amount of $1,194,149 with revenues of $480,000. And again, there are no changes in this budget unit over last year, and we'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Okay. One second here. Any questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the public? If not, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move to approve temporary due pass.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Move on to Animal Control. Unit, Item 85, Budget Unit 266.
Animal control can be found on page 121 of your budget packet. The only change in this budget unit over last year is the revenues. due to the code enforcement ability to assess fines or charges. And so the total expenditures are $240,969 with revenues of $10,000. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Mr. Chair,
Okay,
didn't we decrease this amount? No, right?
This budget unit reflects two contracts. There's a contract for the city of Hollister, and there's a contract for veterinarian services. As you recall, last year, you cut $50,000 from this budget, and we tried to live within those means, and we're pretty close this year when we come to year end by cutting some services, et cetera. However, what's projected for next year is probably a cost of about $230,000 for animal control services and about $6,000 for veterinarian, both down from last year. So that's the best we can do at this point with this contract, I think. You'll be getting that contract tomorrow, or today.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Okay. You know, I'm happy now we're starting to reflect revenues because that kind of was a little sore spot for me. And I
This is
assume...
only a portion of them, though.
What's that?
This is only a portion of the revenues that we're actually going to receive, so.
Yeah, I assume how we're accounting for those revenues, are they provide a report as far as how many licenses are issued and citations are
We can-
issued in the unincorporated area?
We can ask for that detail. What they do normally is when they bill us quarterly, those collections that they make, they take right off the expense, and then we only pay the balance. That's how we're doing it now. In the next contract, that same process will take place, but some of the funding will actually be collecting in-house. So that's why there's two different funding sources that are showed. Maybe I can explain it better to you on Tuesday when we go over the detail.
Because I think that's a pretty important area, how we account for the level of service that we're getting for the contractual price that we're paying. And we could measure it with you know, the compliance with our animal control ordinance as far as licensing and citations. And that revenue should be county revenue. It's not City of Hollister revenue, it's county revenue. And it needs to be accounted for in our books.
Agree.
And the last question I have is, is there a way or mechanism to audit that? As, you know,
I'm sure
not
there
saying, alluding that they would, you know, not give us the full amount, but how would we account for that?
I think we could set up some meetings with them to go over the costs and get the detail enough to evaluate it. So do our internal audit ourselves first and see what's there and ask the questions.
I know how I would suggest we do that is you have an application for everybody's dog license or cat license, and maybe a summary list of each person that has licensed their animal, and a subtotal, and then that accounts for the revenue that the county should be getting, and the same thing for citations. But maybe
Right.
that's how we...
We're trying to work out the citation piece now, and we may have some digital means to do that, so it may be easier than what we're doing now.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move for temporary due pass?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, hearing none. Move on to 86, 101, County Fire.
The county fire budget can be found on page 123 of your budget unit. As you're aware, during the fiscal year, there were changes to the county fire services, and this reflects the anticipated charges due to those changes. And the general fund contribution increased roughly $11,000 due to this change, with the same source of revenues as before. And so total expenditures are $1,106,715, with revenues offsetting in the same amount of $1,106,715. I'd like to request a temporary due pass.
Any questions from the board on this item? I just have one question, and it, just so I understand where it's reflected, is that we more or less pledged Hollister and the city of San Juan funding for their stations. Are we reflect that more in the capital improvement?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, actually this afternoon at 1:30, we're going to be reviewing that with your board. We're going to be discussing the CIP and in particular the fire piece. So at that point, we'll be discussing it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, that was part of the contract agreement that we will build San Juan Bautista, the fire station?
No. No. Good, CAO.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, there was a discussion with the PTAF, and there was we went ahead and made an agreement per your board's direction. At that point, there was we were going to utilize some funding out of capital for a project, a joint project, which would be evaluating. But we went ahead and earmarked those funds in the capital outlay, just so that way we have that available in the beginning of the year and ready to go if we decide to go that route during the year.
Okay, well, I'll ask questions at that time then.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
Move for temporary due pass?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll move on to contributions to community-based organizations, 87, budget unit 540.
That budget unit can be found on page 221 of your budget packet. Since our meeting in May regarding this budget, there's been a change due to the question raised about the board projecting 6% of the sales and use tax towards this budget unit, and so that has been changed to reflect the 6%, and it's now $78,000 without any revenues associated with this department. I believe they're underneath the goals and objectives for 2013-14. It gives a little synopsis of what was requested by the various agencies. The recommendations were status quo. However, based upon the board-approved rate of 6%, it's now at $78,000.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, CEO?
Yes. With this particular item on that, and this goes hand in hand with our contingency, our last item, but on the very bottom of that page, we have that difference of $78,000 compared to the $67,571. We have $10,800, and what we would like to do is allocate $15,000 to the community food bank per the board's direction, but we're recommending that occurs and utilizing the difference of those funds along with the remaining part of contingency for that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I would support that. A week or 2 weeks ago, Supervisor Barrios and I met with representatives from the Community Food Bank, and I would consider this just a one-time or contribution for this year, because as we all know, last year the community block grant that supported the food bank did not go forward, and so that reflects a hardship on that organization that serves so many people in our community this year, and until hopefully the block grant application will be successful this coming year to bring some relief to that organization, but that would serve, I think, the county well, as well. They do meet the needs of a lot of people in our community. Supervisor Barrios, I don't know if you want to elaborate.
No, I concur with you that is what we would like to do, is to be able to assist. But I just want to make sure that as we look at this, we are experiencing another additional $10,000 additional funds from the 6%. Is that correct? So then what our CAO is recommending is that we offer that $10,000 to help the food bank.
Well, $10,800 is what we have here that were extra in those contingencies. What I'm recommending is to add another additional $4,200 at
to make it $15,000.
To make it $15,000 at a contingency to pay or to give to the community food bank for their needs this year, one time.
And I think Supervisor Patella and I feel that this is a very important commitment from the county that we should make if we can. And I know that at this time we cannot commit additional funds because we don't know if they're going to come. We hope that they do. But if we experience any savings, like for instance in the public defenders, and I would like to be able to use additional funds to help the community food bank. Keep in mind that the city of Hollister did not commit any funds at all towards them. And that's a little discouraging, but if we can say that if we experience additional savings, that we would like to commit another, let's say, $10,000, because they came forward with a need for 25, and they serve a lot of families. I want to say in the thousands, and the holidays are coming up November, December, and if we experience with those savings, maybe in the month of October, that we can say, okay, here's the additional $10,000 that you need. So I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but I really feel that this is an important part.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you. All these programs are worthwhile, and they serve the community very well. We have to ensure, and I brought this up a while back when we were thinking about giving a certain percentage, and I said, fine, I think that's a good compromise. And we should really stick to that 6% figure. I can name you 100 worthwhile organizations that haven't come before the board, and if I have to, I will bring them before the board and ask them for funding too, and see how we treat them too. We have to be consistent. We got to stick with that 6%, and the board makes the tough political decisions, and we got to stick to them. And that's why people elected us to represent them in all 5 districts, is to make those tough decisions. And one of those tough decisions is that 6%. It's a good formula. It's a good process. The board gets to select how much money to allocate. I don't know why the city didn't offer to help the community. I don't know. But one thing I do know is that we talked at length at this board rate at 6%, and we should really stick to it and not modify those numbers. It just cautions the board. We're going at a real slippery slope. So I'll just caution the board.
Mr. Chair, if I could,
Yeah.
and I appreciate what Supervisor De La Cruz, he's absolutely right. That's why we have to emphasize that this is only a one-time commitment to help. Keep in mind that the food bank offers the very, very basic need for any person, whether it be us or it be a community member, whoever. Food is the most basic need that there is. And so that's why I feel very strongly about it. And one time, we don't commit from for the next budget year, but if we do get additional funds, I really would like to move in that direction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I certainly understand what Supervisor De La Cruz is saying, and, you know, I view this as kind of a bridge because, you know, the Hollister block grant failed, you know, last year, and we have a serious problem out there. This community has a tremendous need for food. And like Supervisor Barrios mentioned, it's just basic needs, and I think that the organization itself is making every strides it possibly can, really doing everything they possibly can to encourage contribution and support outside of asking county or city government to provide that. And this is, in my tenure as a supervisor, we had done this once before for this organization, because it does, we see the lines there as we go to our county offices out on San Felipe. And so we know that, you know, it's, you know, a lot of volunteers and contributors have stepped up, but this is just because of the loss of a grant opportunity that the state, quite frankly, has been playing games with. And we're kind of the victims of this, being in a small county and not having a whole lot of voters. But we're not the only ones out there, and we're at a point where we could really justify this allocation of funds.
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, you mentioned in your conversation that we have given money before in the past, so there's a pattern here of us giving money. And then the second point is that are we going to backfill all the worthless organizations out there that the state and the federal government cuts them?
Well, you know, that's what makes this job tough for us. We have to kind of pick and choose and prioritize what services we provide.
As long as we get a clear understanding that we get to pick and choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know there's other, as Supervisor De La Cruz said, there's many other worthy nonprofits out there. I know that other nonprofits have gotten into the same position where they did not get a government grant, and then they were scrambling for funds. I guess what I'm asking for is maybe is that this be continued either to this afternoon or even tomorrow. I'd like some background information on why the 4 agencies that are here before us now, why there are the 4 that are here, how the amount was allocated, on what basis they are receiving the funds that are being recommended. I serve on the United Way Board. We go through the same issues with the same agencies, and the need is always greater than the amount to give. But I guess I would like more background on why the amounts were decided upon and who decided upon those amounts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
CEO Espinosa.
I think we can answer that if that's all right with your board. We have Catherine here to be able to discuss that. Just so the board's aware, I believe this is something that was predetermined before with the board, but Catherine's probably going to elaborate a little bit more on that. Go ahead.
Catherine Shaw. So, and I'm going back in memory, this is about 3 years ago when there was another board member. There was, and the economy was in the tank, and so there was discussion about going away from the 6% thing and reformulating how the funds are going to be distributed. And so there were a list of criteria, and we do have it in the files in there, but part of the criteria was you had to have received money from the county 3 years in a row, and there was 2 or 3 other things. Anyway, as it turned out, these 4 agencies that are currently listed had met all the criteria. There's like a list of 7 things. And then there was a set amount decided upon that's how much the county could afford to give that particular year. And even though, say, for instance, one group requested $40,000, the board during discussion said, well, we can't really afford that, we'll give you $23,000. And so that's kind of how it went. I can find that list of criteria for you. Like I said, I think it was first started about 3 years ago.
I might, if I could add something to that. The other thing is that we also looked at how they could leverage the monies that we were
Correct.
giving them. And that was
Yes.
very important to us, because if we gave them 5 so they could secure 10,
Right.
it was a big part of the decision-making. And so I believe that weighed heavily
Yes.
on that as well.
It did. And there was one particular group, advocacy, their $5,000, there was not a way that they could leverage, and so, or they had to have that amount. And then the other group said, well, okay, we'll kick in a little bit, so instead of them only getting $3,600, they were able to get their full 5 so that they could keep their funding.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to find those criteria for you.
Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, you know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I usually am when I'm up here. The problem I have with this whole entire system is it lacks flexibility. You know, I remember last year I met with Hollis Youth Alliance because, you know, they lost some funding. But we don't have the flexibility to offer any money to anybody because of the criteria that has been established. You know, I remember when I first got onto this board, I talked to a board member on this board who shall remain nameless, and I said, you know, we should change this up. This is common sense. Well, common sense, you know, it doesn't fly well sometimes because this is the way it's always been done in San Benito County. I mean, these are important agencies that do a lot of things for our residents, holiness, advocacy. You know, but it's the way it's structured. It offers us no flexibility, and it doesn't make much sense to me. I think moving forward, we need to change it. We should be able to have a pot of money, and we should be able to allocate that money on a year-to-year basis based on need. And this isn't based on need per se. It's based on agencies that have met this set of criteria. So basically, no one else is eligible for that. So when we have a problem, as we do now, we don't necessarily have that flexibility to offer them money because we don't have any money. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
May I respond to that? When I first started here, it was operated as a pot of money, and any agency could apply for those funds. It was like a grant, so anybody could apply for those funds. But as I said, as the economy wasn't doing so well, the board and the CAO at that time tried to come up with a way to hone in. There was also participation with the group Community Foundation, and so there was a partnership 1 year with them as well. So in the 3.5 years or so that I was involved with this, different things were going. I mean, every year it was a different way. So it's up to the board. I mean, you can choose however you want to do it. This is what ended up happening last year and this year. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Senor Espinoza.
And I actually looked into this to gather more information with our neighboring counties, and some of them will actually go out to RFP every year, and whatever the criteria is, at that point go out to the community for, you know, a proposal back to the board, and then at that point, you know, the board will then, you know, evaluate those responses. So that's an option. Some of them actually do multi-year. So it really depends on what the board would like to do, and maybe the following year we could, you know, start the process now, start looking at evaluating it. But that's just an option for you.
You're right. You know, it's interesting. The entire time I've been on this board, it has been done differently a number of times, and I've had former board members tell me that well, we don't want to make those decisions up here. Well, we got to give it to a committee to make those decisions so we don't take the heat. And myself, I just assume make the decisions and take the heat and have the pot of money and based on what you're saying, need. And kind of what we're talking about, though, in my mind, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sales, the 6% that Supervisor De La Cruz is alluding to, 6 and change, came in a little bit higher than what we have here. So we're just talking about $4,000 more. If we allocated the $10,800, that's monies that should be allocated anyway, according to our formula. And to make it a round number, we're just talking about a few $1,000s more, and we're, you know, how the community block grant organizations were separated. Hollister took 3 or 4, and we took 3 or 4, and the Youth Alliance got aced out. The food bank got aced out because they were with the Hollister's community block grant, and ours got funded. And this is just, I think, an effort for the county to, do something for its, the citizens to make sure all the needs are being met.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to stick to the 6%, and I think you're kind of hitting on something. I know everyone comes in and they're asking for X amount of dollars. I know that, and you give them $1 less, trust me, they'll be happy. I mean, I can't find someone who will say, I want $10,000, but you're only giving me $9,000. I don't want it. Trust me, they'll take it, and they'll make good use of it. If we're still short, if we're short on that, was it about $10,491? And I know for a fact, Jóvenes de Antonio, they're requesting 40, and the recommendation is 35,706. So in my book, and this is my compromise to you, Mr. Chair, in my book, give them the difference of that, which is about $10,000, and we just can't find another $5,000 beyond that 6%. That will be my compromise, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And be consistent with the rest, with the advocacy, the senior citizen league services. They're asking for 36, and the recommendation is 3428. Senior council is asking for 30, and the recommendation is 23,437. It totally makes sense to be consistent on this and be consistent on the 6%. And their requesting is 15,000, but the board recommendation can do whatever they want. And to be fair and consistent, stick at that 6% and give them the difference of that 78,000 from the 67,000.
Okay. Any other comments from the board?
For clarification, Mr. Chair, Supervisor De La Cruz, you mean to give it to the agencies that already are on here or to the food bank?
No. What's dry, give it to them, which is 67,571. And then we're short $10,800 to reach that 6% allocation that we have set. Give that $8,800 to the food bank.
Oh, to the food bank,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. With that, I know we have some public comment on this item, and clerk?
Clay Kemp, Executive Director of the Seniors Council Area Agency on Aging. And if you'll indulge me a little bit longer than I would normally talk here, I can answer some of the questions and shed some additional light on the history of these programs and the funding and why we're under the process we currently are. The AAA of Santa Cruz and San Benito counties is operated by a nonprofit, which I represent. In most parts of California, the vast majority, this would be a county department, and this would be part of a county budget that's coming forth. But in the wisdom of this county and Santa Cruz County supervisors, they've recognized that nonprofits can provide these services cheaper than county government can, hence our establishment. And I was just looking this weekend to verify that, because I'm always saying that, and once in a while I need to verify those facts. So I actually compared the staff salaries of an equivalent size AAA. I looked at Monterey County and compared that to us. And their staff salaries were literally twice what ours were for the same positions. So I say that with a great amount of confidence that we're saving your community a great amount of money by doing this as a nonprofit. Our entire budget for services in San Benito County is currently about $400,000, and we contract with the agencies plus one more on this list for those services. 5 or 6 years ago, I would have said that figure is $600,000, but due to federal and state cuts, which is where most of this money comes from, we've been reduced by 50%. So the hits to these programs have already been huge. And we've seen some of that in our county funding as well. But again, if we go to a county-based model, instead of seeing this small budget from each of us, you would see me presenting a agency-wide budget where you would see the allocations to Jóvenes de Antaño, the allocations to senior citizens, legal services, et cetera, down the list, and the board would be making that decision. Instead, you're just seeing these matched dollars, and the reason you're seeing that is part of this process, and we have to adhere to it, is in order to receive these state and federal dollars, we have to provide local match. And the local match is provided by a variety of ways. Some of it does have to be local government funds. So this allocation is your local match to the state and federal dollars. And that's why it's critical to all of us. Now, I don't want to disparage the food bank in any way, because I agree. I mean, what's more basic than food except maybe shelter? They're both really critical needs. So I understand you're trying to weigh those different factors, but I think it's important to understand the background behind these dollars and part of why you're funding this program or these programs as opposed to, you know, something else. I think it's important. It's actually great to be here where we're talking about new money, you know, additional money. I mean, how long has it been that since we've had that discussion? But one thing that I think is important to remember is that a year ago, all these programs took a hit as part of the 6% rule, and we all embraced that and said we're happy to share our portion of the loss as long as when things get better, we're remembered and it's not forgotten that we took a hit. We think we should be able to share some of that increased revenue. Now, you guys are absolutely right that you can arbitrarily decide not to fund any of us or, you know, fund all of us at whatever level, and I think that's a more complex process. But those are the key things that I wanted to touch base on. I think that helps you. You probably have more questions about match, so I'll stay here and answer that. And please don't remove me from the mic until I say that I want to express my sincere gratitude to staff and the supervisors for recognizing that this is a real need in the community and stepping up and doing something about that. Okay. So thanks for that.
Thank you very much.
So questions about match that I can help with?
Questions from the board? No?
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Pauline Valdivia?
Good morning. I'll be brief. I know. Thank you, Chair Botello and members of the board. I just want to, first of all, thank you for your continued support in funding these programs. I just want to say that what's really important in terms of need, if it wasn't the need, I wouldn't be here asking for these funds so we can deliver the meals that we need, that the folks in the community need county-wide. It is essential. I still have cannot meet all the need because we have a waiting list because of lack of funds, like what Clay was saying, and also the cost of living. But I just want to I guess remind you that we've been coming here since the late 70s, early 80s, and you have been very supportive. Like Clay was saying, we do need these funds to leverage to get the match money so we can leverage and get the funding from the federal, from the Older Americans Act under the federal government, and it's essential. But I just wanted to stress there is a need, a dire need. Our elderly population are living longer, they're frailer, they live alone, and they need these services to be able to survive and keep out of nursing homes. That's really important because it's less expensive for us to provide these services outside of a nursing home. Everybody knows how expensive that is. And I just wanted to tell you that we continue to have credibility in the community, stability, and also, we're not going to go away. It's going to be here even though we don't provide the service. But if you continue to support us, we can provide the service at a less cost than government agency can do it. So I just want to say that, and I want to thank you again, not only for myself, but also from the participants, the Board of Directors at Jóvenes. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody has questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Creighton Mendeville?
Good afternoon, Board. Creighton Mendeville, Directing Attorney for Senior Citizens Legal Services of Santa Cruz and San Benito counties. I just wanted to speak quickly about the services and the needs that we provide for the county. There are a lot of critical needs. We help about 100 clients a year in our Hollister office. We did not get funded by the city of Hollister in the last go-around. We lost money from that. About 50% of our cases deal with fraud or money being stolen from elder clients. We deal with about 2 cases of elder abuse every year. We deal with approximately 10 housing issues every year, which is normally eviction defense, where people are being forced out of their houses. And approximately 15 cases every year we deal with supporting seniors to receive their full share of supplemental benefits, such as Social Security Disability, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things that we help people in the community that they would not be able to do themselves. So we go, we represent people. There was a case that we handled recently where a Hollister resident who is disabled, we went to the Social Security Appeals Board in San Jose and were able to get about $25,000 for that person because their benefits were being denied, and we were able to roll back their initial date of disability to be able to get them those funds. So a lot of the agencies who are here and do this are serving basic needs. And I think it's very difficult, and I'm glad I'm not in your position where I have to judge whose basic needs and who is more important than other. But I just want you to know that we're still here and we continue to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Kathleen Johnson?
Good morning, Supervisors. I'm Kathleen Johnson, Executive Director of Advocacy, Inc., and we provide the long-term care ombudsman program services to both Santa Cruz and San Benito County. And that, as most of you know, include the 2 skilled nursing facilities and their 3 assisted living facilities in the county. This past year, well, many of you already know what we do, but the important piece to notice is that these services are mandated, that federal and state law require that all of these, that the ombudsman services be available to all residents in all communities. So we keep trying to make that happen, and we keep trying to make it happen in a timely basis. And as everyone else has pointed out, we make it happen at a much lower cost than if it had to come directly from a government agency. We, too, were not funded by the city of Hollister, which means that we lost money that we can use for match. And the request we asked for this year in the $6,000 amount was only a portion of that amount that we now don't have for match, which means you have less federal funds available. And yet the services will still keep coming. The important piece also is that the ombudsman, as most of you know, is responsible. Either the ombudsman or local law enforcement is responsible for responding to and investigating all abuses that occur in long-term care facilities, which include the assisted living and the skilled nursing, as well as developmentally disabled congregate homes. Because we are available, it means that law enforcement doesn't have to respond to cases that don't meet the criminal criteria for involvement. But if we don't have the money to do that, then we do have the alternative of turning those cases over to law enforcement, which we have desperately tried not to have happen, knowing the strain on law enforcement as it is. So we appreciate all of the support and recognition, and the fact that the residents of San Benito County who are living in assisted living or skilled whether in this county or in Santa Cruz County, because many of your residents have gone to facilities outside of San Benito County to live on long-term, and their families are commuting further to visit them. The services of the Ombudsman are there. The abuses are responded to. The problems are addressed and resolved, and the quality of life for your residents is continuing to be supported by the Ombudsman program. You help us do that. And as much as we need more, we appreciate the past support. We appreciate the fact that we worked with you last year, and we're hoping that you will work with all of us this year, recognizing that federal funds come to you because of your investment. And these are contracted services which we are happy to provide.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Susan Thompson?
Mr. Richmond asked me to bring this for you. Good morning, board members, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for a few moments to talk to you a little bit about the situation with the food bank. As you may recall, I was here when you made the determination to go to the 6% rule. And the reason that I recalled that your board chose that option was because that was approximately the amount of funding that you had historically committed to community-based organizations at that time, and it became that percentage. Somewhat arbitrary because it was based, again, on past expenditure levels, not on a reevaluation of need and or your budget's ability to fund them. So I have to say there was, you know, clearly some logic to it, but it also was clearly discretionary on your board's part. Further, the appeal to this year being made from the food bank, again, is not to diminish in any way what you currently are doing for the AAA programs, the Area Agency on Aging programs. Those bring significant amounts of dollars into this community for services to a very fragile and needy population, no question about it. So we don't like to think of ourselves as being in competition. But I will tell you, the food bank does serve on a weekly basis 478, as of last count, per week, seniors in home deliveries of brown bag food, which is a 15-pound bag of groceries that is delivered to low-income seniors that augments the food that they have in their home to get them by. Most of our seniors also are receiving service from these programs here, including Hoveness. But Hoveness is a number of meals per week limited. Our meals per week per bag of groceries is about 11 per individual. The $25,000 that we did request that you consider this year was truly based on need. That provides, I want to give you a number, quick number, because you will be shocked by the amount that buys. $25,000 will buy you 3,342 bags, each bag with 11 meals in it. You're talking about 68 cents a meal, and you're talking about 36,762 meals that need to be delivered, and that is 1/4 of the meals that we provide to seniors in this community on a regular basis. I'm talking weekly. So, in terms of need, I don't think that any of us could deny that. I do understand your situation, but I will tell you it's hard to sit in the audience and listen to a department head say, I have $23,000 in more revenue that's not recognized in my budget, and you didn't make an adjustment to your budget for that, and we need $25,000 desperately to keep this program going. So I'm thinking if you really have a will and you put a high priority on these basic needs for folks in this community, you will find a way to help us through this. We have made applications to CDBG through the city again this year. Feel very good about that. We actually ranked very well last year, and hoping that that will be funded. If it is not, we're going to have a much bigger problem. So I hope that you'll consider that, and please not either or. We are not in competition with these other programs and can't afford to be in this community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Marty Richmond?
We're trying to get through this budget unit on this session if we can, and then we'll take a lunch after this.
Good morning, Marty Richmond from Hollister. I've spoken on this issue before. I'm not here to advocate for any particular of the services or requests. I am not here to talk against any of them. I just want to say I realize that this year I'm already OBE, overcome by events. We're already here again. And we're flying along on the budget, and I'm very disappointed that we're getting to this point again. And we have not done the preparation, in my opinion, that we needed to do. I've talked about the Intergovernmental Committee sitting down and coming to an agreement between the city and the county about how we were going to do this. Come up with some formulas that make sense, put some flexibility in the system, make the decisions based on presentations that you get with all the data prior to getting to the budget point. Because we're bogged down again, and you're trying to make an impossible decision. And it's impossible because you're trying to do it here in front of the audience, in front of the people in the county, without having a chance to sit down, go through the paperwork meticulously, and decide. And you haven't set a structure for doing that. And we've done this now year after year after year, and I've sat through the same presentations at the city, and I've sat now through them here again. And I just, obviously this year, we are where we are, and there's no way to back it up, and I'm not suggesting you back it up. But I hope in the future that you start working on this portion of your budget the day after this budget is approved. Because in addition to making decisions in the cold light of day and reading through the things and making those difficult decisions, you will be able to set down some rules that will at least give all these good nonprofits that do the best work some idea of what their budget is going to be from you, how much they can count on contributions from the county. And I think that's very important because they have to look forward somewhat. They have their matching funds issues. They have to start looking at different programs. If it looks like we're going to let them hang somebody out to dry and they can't get their matching funds, they're either going to have to cut their programs or start looking for somewhere else to get matching funds. Perhaps they could go directly to the community and say, oh, well, the Board of Supervisors has told us it's going to be X $1,000. We know that's what it's going to be. Obviously, there's some flexibility based on your income, and I'll wrap up. Thank you. And but we need so much more to get over this hump. So I just think if you don't eventually come to the point of doing that with flexibility in the system, every year we're going to be doing the same thing. And I just don't think that's the best way to get the best result because a lot of this money is leveraged, so it's very important where it goes and who uses it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board, and those are points well taken. I know we've wrestled with this a number of different ways, and over the years, we thought about having a CAB board kind of go through the application process, then intergovernmental committee to see if our coordinated effort with the city of Hollister for some of these organizations should take place, and we should allocate only enough money to leverage the most dollars as we can get and not a dollar more. And in all honesty, I don't have a clear picture of that, and then you need staff to support that effort, and we're kind of struggling with that at the moment. So what we have today is the approach that the administration have come up with. CEO Espinoza.
Yeah, and just so the board's aware, on May 28th, we brought to your board it was the status quo budget, and obviously there was some work that needed to be done from then till now, so that's why we obviously have a few changes here now, some concerns with the additional money, how we're going to handle that. And also, too, with all due respect, with the ag, the extra funding, we're not 100% sure on that either. Is it going to be lower? It's going to be more, so we really don't know. So I think at a later day we probably need to make some sort of an amendment or do something with that. And at that point, as Supervisor Barrios brought out, we can address this maybe at a later date.
And from our meetings, with the community food bank, you know, a couple of things came to light. One is that they're not asking for $10,000. They're really asking for 25 from us, and was hoping to get another 25 from the city. And so we're falling well short of, you know, of what they need, on top of going and to the foundation and other organizations and contributions to meet their needs until the next block grant is available. Another fact that on our end, the county's end, we need to do a better job in qualifying people for programs such as food stamps. We learned that because we're, of our population and our demographics and economics of this county, there's a number of people that qualify for food stamps that aren't getting them. And that is real monies coming in from the federal government into this community that would provide jobs at the local stores and monies to, you know, that would be exchanged in our community. That's not happening, to the tune of about $3 million. And in the long term, we have to find a way to qualify these people and get them, you know, off of maybe getting a bag of groceries at the food bank and maybe be on food stamps. Those programs are available to help folks in need. So anyway, I'm done with this. What's the direction of the board?
Mr. Chair, I'll just make some additional comments that our contingency fund is an emergency fund. When people don't have any food, that's an emergency. I can't imagine any greater emergency other than a catastrophe, a natural disaster that would happen. So I, at this time, if we've heard all the testimony from the public, would like to make a motion that we pass, as presented, temporary due pass, approved temporary due pass, with the additional 6% of 10,000, I believe it was 10,800 and something, to be given to the food bank on an emergency basis, and that we consider any additional funding that comes through as we move through the budget, that we give them the additional funds needed for their emergency need of food for our community, to total 25,000. So that's my motion. I hope it's clear enough.
Mr. Chair, I call for a division of the motion.
Pardon me?
I call for a division of the motion.
I have to have a second, or do you?
Okay, I'll second. I'll call for a division of the motion.
Okay.
And the division of the motion to the author of the maker is we vote on the 6% first, and then we vote on the additional comments that Supervisor Barrios has said.
I can do that, Mr. Chair. So then in my first part of the motion, then I will change it to approve temporary due pass, the 78, and I wish I had it in front of me, but I moved my papers around. I believe it's, let me go back up to my notes. Okay, temporary due pass, $78,000, with the additional from the 67.2 that we had previously recommended or was brought to us. The difference would go to the food bank. That's the first part of my motion.
And then for further clarification, as far as the additional revenues in the budget.
That'll come as a second motion in a minute.
Right.
But I think we need to get past. Is that what you had requested?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, or?
Is there a second on my motion?
Yeah. Supervisor De La Cruz second the motion. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Hearing none. We got that done. Good.
Now, on the second part of my motion, I would at this time like to recommend that that any additional unexpected funding that comes to the county, that we will consider giving the food bank the difference between the 25,000 requested, what we are giving them now with this last motion, from those additional funds that we may be securing, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And that would be, for instance, if the public defender's budget, if we're successful in realizing some savings there, that maybe a portion would be utilized to for the balance of that 25? Is that what you're saying?
And that is correct. Keeping in mind that this is an emergency request. It's not just a request made for, because we want additional 25,000. It's an emergency. They didn't get the money from that grant. They're not getting the money from the city. And I think we need to, as a county, make sure that, that we provide that emergency need as best as we can.
Mr. Chair, as the support of the second, and I have to continue it in order for the first to continue, I can't support that part of the motion.
Okay, well,
Well, I made the motion, so I guess we need a second.
No, I'm seconded. I just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but when it comes time to a vote, I won't be able to support it.
Okay, so,
Supervisor Munzer?
okay, so unfortunately, we're tying our hands to any additional revenue that we've come across in our next budget year. We are tying our hands to 15,000 of that goes immediately to the food bank.
No,
They get the money first above anything else, public safety, anything else.
No, that wasn't my motion. My motion is that we consider any funds to, because we don't know if it's coming, we don't know what other need we may have, but that we consider putting that additional funding towards the difference.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that clarifies your motion. 'Cause
Yes.
I thought you were tying our hands.
No, because we don't know what's coming, we don't know what other greater need, I mean, I don't know that there's a greater need than food, but, yeah, that would be
All right,
my
thank you.
motion.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before I ask for the vote?
Mr. Chair, the board shouldn't really, I mean, I know we're not tying our hands, but at the same time, we might have needs in other departments that, the taxpayers elected us to represent the county business first. And the county is the people, I understand that, but there's functions within the county that has to be financed and protected. So I don't know if I can support that motion, even as Supervisor Barrio has stated, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's a fair comment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
3-2. Supervisor Barrios, Munzer, and myself voting in favor, and Supervisor Rivas and De La Cruz oppose on the second portion of the motion. With that, we probably should take a break and take lunch, and we'll reconvene at 1:30.